Hi, everyone. It is so nice to see so many people coming into the call. We are having a true global call this evening or this morning, wherever you are based. So maybe you can give us a quick indication in the chat where you are dialing in from this morning or this evening. So I'm in Singapore. So nice to be here. Sydney, Thailand, Japan. Amazing. San Francisco. So amazing. It is so good to see you from all over the world. So good morning or good evening. Thank you to those of you who is staying up very late to join the call. My name is Cecilia. I will start off the session with a quick housekeeping. So Russell, if you can move to the next slide. So this session, this evening, we will be recording the session. For those of you who need a translation, you can turn on your closed caption. So if you move onto your control bar at the bottom under the more setting, you can find the closed caption function, which you can turn on there. And then we also have activated our Q&A function. So you can drop in your questions throughout the session in the Q&A. And we will have dedicated time to answer Q&As as well later on. So do raise your questions in there. All right. Russell, the next slide.
Oh, yeah, just one thing. I see there's a comment here about an echo. And when we've seen this in the past, one solution for some attendees is to leave the webinar and come back if your echo doesn't resolve itself. All right.
Thank you.
Next.
All right. So for today's session, it's a collaborative session between B Lab Singapore and PCX. PCX is a B Corp certified in Singapore with operations globally. And we are bringing you a session focused on plastic, EPR, and circularity. So the team from PCX will give you an introduction to PCX Markets and Solutions. After that, I will give you a quick overview of B Corp, B Lab, and specifically our environmental stewardship and circularity impact topic. And then the team from PCX will run you through how you measure and manage your plastic footprint, EPR, as well as some reduction strategies. And we will end with a Q&A session. So let me do a quick self-introduction before I pass it over to Russell and Athalie from PCX. I'm Cecilia. I'm a lead impact management at B Lab Singapore. In my role, in addition to leading impact management, I also work in community engagement and training, supporting companies across industries to define, measure, and communicate their impact using B Lab's tools and frameworks. A key part of my work involves designing and facilitating workshops, training sessions, and networking events that connect, inspire, and educate the B Corps and aspiring B Corp community in Singapore. I'm passionate about translating complex sustainability and ESG concepts into practical, engaging, and actionable learning experiences for diverse audiences. I'm happy to explore the important topic of responsible plastic with Russell and Athalie today, and happy to share more of B Lab standards in a little bit. So yes, let me hand it over to Russell and Athalie.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Russell Davis from PCX Markets. I head up products and services for us. I've been working in the circular economy space for a number of years now. I will also have a background in management consulting with the Boston Consulting Group. And I do a lot of work with PCX focused on EPR. Currently, we're serving multiple clients on EPR compliance, especially in the US. But we also have an EPR compliance arm doing a lot of the work in Asia as well, especially the Philippines. Athalie, would you like to give a quick introduction?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Russell. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. So I'm Athalie Reyes. I'm from PCX Solutions, sorry. And I'm from the nonprofit organization. I'm the senior manager for EPR projects, and this means that I run the PRO or producer responsibility operations in the Philippines, as well as provide some consulting and grant implementation in other parts of the world, including the Philippines as well. Yeah, so I'll hand it over to Cecilia, I think, for the next few slides.
Oh, I've got it. We're going to start with kind of a fun exercise to get people thinking about this. So we've got a poll. How familiar are you with packaging EPR? It's going to be a topic tonight, and based on what we hear from the poll, we might lean into this a little more, a little less, and we'll also be able to share the results. So it'll be really interesting to see kind of where everybody sits compared to the group. So I'm going to launch a poll, and it should pop up on your screen around now. So I'll give everybody a few, maybe half a minute, to start entering in how familiar you are with packaging EPR, just generally. All right, we've still got responses coming in. Don't be shy. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll in about 10 seconds, and then we'll see how we stack up. All right, so let's share these results. So what I'm seeing here is the majority here, 44%, are a little bit familiar with EPR. There's a few people who have the question, what is packaging EPR? So there was certainly a lot to learn about that today. We have a couple experts in the room as well, folks who both know a lot about it and are actively managing it at their company. Super excited to have you guys here as well. EPR will be one topic that we're covering tonight, as well as circularity and plastic responsibility. And we don't have everybody respond here, and so I would just encourage you, if you get comfortable with the poll function, share where you're at. It's not a test. All right, so let's keep going. We're gonna do a couple of quick introductions about the three organizations here. I'm going to start with PCX Markets. PCX Markets is on a mission to accelerate transition to a circular economy where no plastic waste ends up in nature. We are a certified B Corp, very much aligned with our mission, and we operate a plastic responsibility platform. We're the global leader in verified plastic recovery credits through our marketplace. We're working with many multinational companies, and we have three main offerings that we give out to the world. The first one is responsibility intelligence, the stark green circle you see here. This is technology platform to help with regulatory compliance and understanding how your plastic footprint works within your organization and your packaging footprint. We also offer Recovery Marketplace, where we feature 52 cleanup projects across 16 countries, where you can drive plastic recovery in a responsible way. And through that network, we also offer circular plastics. If companies are looking to source verified PCR into their supply chains, this is another thing we do as well. Enough about PCX Markets. Visit us online if you want to know more, reach out. I'm going to pass it over to Athalie to talk a little bit about PCX Solutions.
Yeah, and just to provide a brief introduction, so PCX Solutions, we're a nonprofit organization. We share the same mission with PCX Markets. That's why we're partners in this. We partner also with all stakeholders to find solutions to tackle the plastic crisis, both upstream, meaning reduction and avoidance, and downstream, meaning recovery and diversion of plastic wastes. So we focus on just three areas. These are the development and implementation of our global voluntary standards, such as the Plastic Pollution Reduction Standard, and more recently, the Alternative Materials Certificate Framework is undergoing public consultation now. So also, if you want a chance to give feedback to this new upcoming standard, please go to our website at pcxsolutions.org. We also focus on policy, both on a global level and national level. On a global level, we are very much participating observer to the global plastic treaty negotiations. And on a national level, we work on various EPR policies and its implementation in the Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, some US states, and other countries as well. So in the Philippines, we are currently a producer responsibility organization with more than 120 companies that we're supporting for their compliance. Lastly, we work on grant implementation from donors such as UNIDO, UNEP, and World Bank. These grants focus on improving EPR implementation and social inclusion aspects of EPR and general waste management. So we also help companies or institutions together with PCX Markets develop their plastic stewardship strategies, including upstream reduction, education, and baselining. Next slide, please. Then some of the highlights of the impacts that we've achieved so far through the plastic pollution reduction standards, we've issued and enabled the collection of and recovery of 177,000 metric tons of post-consumer plastic waste across 10 countries with 50 project partners across Asia, Australia, Africa, and Latin America. And then the next slide I think this is my last slide. Yeah, and this is just to highlight some of the impacts that we've achieved through our publications and various global networks. So again, I mentioned the Global Treaty. We're an active member of Prevent Waste Alliance, also some other international networks that really foster an expertise in circular economy. Yeah, with that, I'll give it back to Russell. Thank you.
Actually, Cecilia is up if you want to talk a little bit about B Lab.
Yes, so let me talk a little bit about B Lab and B Corp certification. B Lab is a nonprofit network working to transform the global economy so it benefits people, communities, and the planet. Started in 2006, B Lab has championed the idea that business can and should be a force for good. We believe a different kind of economy is not only possible but necessary, one where companies create value for all stakeholders, not just shareholders. Many of you may know B Lab through B Corp certification. So certified B corporations are companies that meet high standards of social and environmental performance, accountability, and transparency. Today, there are more than 10,000 B Corps globally across 160 industries, from small businesses to large multinational companies. Beyond certification, B Lab develops standards and tools and programs that help shift business behavior. At the same time, we mobilize the B Corp community to take collective action on some of society's most challenging and pressing issues. So I'm going to just drop in the chat for you where you can get more information about B Corp and B Corp certification that you can read at your own time. So for today's purpose, I'm going to focus more on one specific component of our standards that relates to the work of PCX. Russell, you can move on. Oh, you have a poll. Yes, let's do your poll.
Yes, before we get into this, we're going to do another quick test. Who is familiar with B Lab's environmental stewardship and circularity standards? And so this is a quick one, yes or no, or you are a total expert and you've already used them in a B Lab certification. Responses are coming in quick here. This question must have been easier. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll and share the results. So Cecilia, it looks like many folks are not familiar with the new parts of the B Lab standards. So lots for people to understand here. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing this and we're going to get into the content.
All right, awesome, thank you. So yes, thank you for your participation in the poll as well. So I will share quickly a little bit more about the overall B Corp standards and then delve into the specific topic that we talk about, circularity and environmental stewardship. So within the B Lab standards, one of the things that sets B Corp certification apart from many other standards and certifications is that it's not focused on a single product or service, but that it's holistic and evaluates a company's entire operations. So within our standards for B Corp certification, we have 7 impact topics as well as foundation requirements. So in our impact topics, we cover E, S, and G. So under governance, we have purpose and stakeholder governance and government affair and collective action. Then under our social topics, we have human rights, fair work and justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So these look at how you treat your workers as well as your communities and supply chain. And then under environment, we look at climate action as well as environmental stewardship and circularity, again covering not only your own operations, but that of your supply chain and your purchase decisions that you make. Within foundation requirements, companies would have to answer questions around eligibility for certification as well as risk. So within the risk profile, we have a question that is specific to companies that work with single-use and virgin plastic materials. And companies would then have to self-identify that they are within this industry. And being in the industry does not disqualify you from certification, but it would then mean that your company would have to answer additional questions around inflow and management of your plastic materials. All right, let's move on. So companies of different sizes would see different requirements based on the size. Larger companies would have to comply with more requirements. And then we also differentiate companies based on the sectors that they are in. So companies that are in higher environmental footprint sectors, such as agriculture, manufacturing, wholesale, retail, may need to answer or comply with more of the sub-requirements than, say, companies with fewer environmental risks. Those in service sectors would comply with fewer and different set of requirements. Yeah, so we can move on. So why are we talking about environmental stewardship and circularity, and why does this matter to us? This environmental stewardship and circularity, in short, we call it ESC, impact topic, asks companies to understand the environmental impacts and take meaningful action to reduce them across both their operations and value chain. At its core, ESC is about taking responsibility for a company's environmental footprint through more sustainable resource use, circular design, and responsible sourcing and procurement policies. It provides a practical roadmap for companies on taking environmental action through monitoring, through doing impact assessments, through thinking of how you use your resources, and then, of course, how you design your products as well. We can move on. Russell? Thank you. So the first subtopic, ESC1, talks about monitoring and assessing. So here we want to understand companies. We want companies to understand exactly what is the environmental impact, and the only way they can understand the environmental impact is really through measuring and assessing the impact. So here we talk about waste generation, energy use, water consumption, and if relevant, animal welfare as well. For larger companies, they would also think beyond their own operations and assess the environmental impacts across the value chain. For today's discussion, I think ESC 1.1 waste production is particularly relevant. So what do we want to know under waste production? We want companies to monitor the waste generated from their operations and also track where the waste ultimately goes. So it's one thing to just monitor how many tonnage of waste you generate, but it's another ultimately to understand where it goes after it's generated, and also in the location we are based, what the infrastructure available is for actually managing and processing that waste. So I think this is really relevant to EPR, what EPR is trying to solve as well. We can move on. In environmental strategy, the focus is turned to companies to how they actually turn their assessment into an action. So we take it a step further from ESC 1, which was the assessment. Under this standard, companies are expected to develop structured environmental strategies, processes, and transition plans to address their most significant environmental impacts across both operations and their value chain. ESC2 encourages companies to move beyond identifying impacts and start embedding environmental priorities into business strategies and decision making. Here, I want to highlight ESC 2.6, which actually is for companies that are in a minor environmental footprint sector. So where ESC 1 may not have applied to them, ESC 2.6 will apply to them, where we actually ask companies who may not have the impact within their own operations to think about the impact of their clients. So if you are working with clients who have large plastic footprints, how do you assess their impacts and how do you help them to mitigate their impacts? Okay. We can move to the next one. So in ESC 3, we talk about circularity. So this topic has gained a lot of popularity in the last few years, and we really want to embed circularity into product design and even into your packaging that you have, thinking about how that packaging can become a long-lasting, usable material. At its core, circularity is about rethinking how material flow through a business, moving away from the traditional take, make, and waste model and towards systems that keep materials in use for as long as possible. So this includes reducing reliance on virgin, non-renewable materials, increasing the use of recycled or renewable inputs, designing products and packaging for durability and reuse, and lastly, improving recovery systems, such as recycling, composting, refurbishment, or take-back programs. So yes, the goal is not only to reduce waste, but to support companies to become more regenerative in the process. We can move on. So for the next section, when we talk about circularity, we also want companies to follow the hierarchy of thinking what should we do, focus most of our attention on before we think about end of life. So we ask companies to think about avoiding strategies, so avoiding and reducing single-use products and packaging, designing products for long-term use, followed by products that can recirculate after use, and lastly, products that can be recirculated at the end of life. So always start from the top on trying to avoid where possible. We can move on. So ESC 4 is where we monitor action. So from through the progress, through the standard, from assessing, developing your strategy, we want to see companies progress to action. So for companies pursuing B Corp certification, in the initial audit of the initial certification, they will be expected to show us how they monitor and assess the impact and what is the strategy that they're going to employ. And then when it comes to the year 3 and 5 audits, they would have to show progress towards the action. The expectation may not be that they are perfect and have completed all the tasks that they set themselves, or all the targets that they have set out, but that they are actually tracking their progress towards the targets that they have set. We can move to the next one. So then we come to ESC 5. For this, we ask companies to not only focus on their own operations, but also think about how their procurement and supply chain impact the environment. So for many companies, the majority of environmental impacts happen beyond their direct operations across supplier networks, more raw material sourcing, manufacturing, logistics, and distribution. ESG5 encourages companies to extend environmental responsibilities across the value chain and work collaboratively with suppliers to drive improvement. So this could include evaluating the environmental impact of key procurement decisions, working with suppliers to reduce environmental risk and impact, and improving traceability and sourcing practices for high-risk raw materials. So yeah, this brings our environmental stewardship and circularity to a full circle. I'm going to drop in the chat a link for you that you can go and read more about the specific ESG impact topic and also see how it applies to your company based on your company size and sector. And of course, at the end of the session, my contact will be there as well for you to contact with follow-up questions. All right. I will hand it back to Russell.
All right. So we've got another question here. So which of the B Corp requirements is your company already working on? Whether this is for B Corp specifically, or if it's just something you're doing generally. Like which one of these are you doing the most action on today? I see the answers coming in. Very interesting. Give people about 5 more seconds to answer, then we'll take a look.
Amazing. For this poll, Russell, can I only select one answer or multiple answers?
Yeah, no, just one answer. Which one are you like primarily focused on?
Okay.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and end this one and share the results. So circularity is the winner, with a higher share than anything else. That seems to be what people were focusing on the most right now. Second place, we have monitoring and assessment, which makes sense. A lot of people want to track their progress before taking action to understand what's happening. And a little bit less on environmental strategy and environmental impact of supply chain. So interesting to see where, for attendees, like where you stack up compared to the other folks here on this call.
I think this is also interesting because in B Lab standards, that is really also where we ask companies to start. So we do ask them to start with monitoring and assessing. And those that are product-based, retail, wholesale, manufacturing, we ask them to concentrate on circularity. So yes, this is amazing.
Excellent.
Thanks.
All right, let's keep going. The next section, we're going to talk a little bit about tracking your plastic footprint. How do you measure it? What is it? And we have the global expert athlete here to talk a little bit about how it works. So I'm going to go on mute here and let athlete educate us.
Yeah, thanks, Russell. Yeah, so actually, I've listed here a few definitions of footprint, corporate plastic footprint, but the reality is there is really some level of standardization to be done for the terminologies related to plastic footprint. However, for the purpose of this webinar, because we know the goals here is really to have this baseline to thereby affect some corporate strategies, like for circularity, for monitoring evaluation. So we'll stick with the definition of corporate plastic footprint here, which refers to the amount of plastic in kilograms, metric tons, or pounds, depending on if you're in the US or other parts of the world, right? That can be measured or is a result of its direct operation and sales, as well as those influenced or they have indirect impacts. This is because the importance of footprinting or baselining at this stage is really to assess, monitor, report accountability and compliance for some that have EPR regulations already in place, or those who are just doing this on a voluntary or corporate accountability aspect. This will also drive comprehensive and effective policy, strategies, and action plan. It will give us an accurate baseline to set our targets and also to track and report on those targets. And then also it helps us identify gaps and supports needed in terms of technical capacity and financial. So we can go to the next slide. So this is a bit of a whiteboard. So Russell, I need your help to just zoom to the topmost arrows there, please. Yeah. So in any footprint assessment, we basically created this process flow out of a combination of multiple methodologies for footprinting. In any footprint assessment, the first step is really always to define your objectives. This is the why, and this will guide the entire assessment. So the next step is once we know our objectives, we try to understand our supply chain and determine what are our levels of control in that supply chain. So below there are also examples of what can be in your direct control. Mostly these are your company operations. Then there's also indirect control. For example, post-consumer activities for those who sell products to consumers. And then there's also those that we can only influence, such as our vendor suppliers in either the upstream operations or downstream operations. So basically, you have to define like what scope that you can get data for the next steps of the assessment. So the next step here, once you understand your supply chain, is we also identify what plastics are there or what packaging materials are there. So what type of data do we need and at what granularity do we need it? So this can also refer to regulations or even just your corporate mandates, basically. So we identify the sources of waste generation as well as the sources of data for that. So after that comes data collection and analysis, and this is where PCX solutions or PCX markets can actually help you because we've developed a calculator to kind of help you consolidate your plastic footprint data and also assist you in kind of knowing where to look or who to ask, basically. So just feel free to reach out to Russell or myself if you need help with your plastic footprint. An important step for us after the assessment is really a third-party validation of results prior to reporting, because this will provide an extra layer of credibility, especially if the results will feed into your compliance obligations or self-declared environmental claims. So we can go to the next slide. Sorry, I messed up the whole presentation by adding a whiteboard there. Yeah, so I'll just show a quick case study. So this was for an American institution. So basically, they don't really have a post-consumer aspects because they don't really sell products, but we identified their scope as some office supplies, custodial services, some catering services, and only those that they have direct and indirect control over. So because they don't have the post-consumer aspect and they don't really do a lot of sourcing, so no upstream. And then we focused on their products, primary and secondary packaging. So we worked with them to find data sources and we did the whole plastic footprint assessment. And what that really led to is for them to define like what are their short-term actions, such as reduction of custodial plastics through communal disposal areas and even improving the waste segregation with that strategy. And then they also are trying to work at some midterm actions like catering and events intervention, so potentially reuse and return systems, organization-wide waste reduction, information, education, and communication campaigns, and some easier supplier packaging interventions. And then for long-term actions, they're really looking at a more sustainable procurement policy, sustainable events policy, and of course, replication of pilots to other divisions of the organization. And then hopefully there are some phase outs and replacement of really what we call as non-essential or unnecessary and problematic plastics. Yeah. So yeah, I'll turn it over back to Russell, I think.
Thanks, Athlete. So, another pulse check for the audience. Is your packaging usage data under control? We'll do another quick check here. And then get to see where you stack up versus others. So the options here are, we don't track our packaging data or our plastic inventory or footprint systematically. We're trying to do it. We're having some trouble. We're not super mature yet. We're on track to have it under control, or we already have it effectively managed, whether that's for internal goals or EPR reporting. All right, give people about 5 more seconds for this. And then we are going to end this poll and see how we stack up. All right, so is your packaging usage data under control? In the first 2 categories, we have, what's that, about 60%, a little over half of the audience, just getting started. You're either not tracking it or you're trying to make some progress, but having a little trouble with that. And then there's a few people who are, outstanding. You already have it managed effectively. This is super great progress. I'm sure Cecilia at B Lab would be very happy to learn about this. And congratulations if you made it this far yet. But if you're just getting started, I think the takeaway here is you're not alone. It's new for a lot of people in terms of a function that people are trying to manage. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing that now. And this is going to bring us into our first round of Q&A. So if you have any specific questions, you can drop them in the chat or in the Q&A. And just to get us started, I'm going to ask a question to Cecilia to get us started about the B Corp requirements. And I'm wondering, Cecilia, since some of these requirements are relatively new, the methodology for B Corp has changed in the past couple of years. Is there one of these environmental categories that companies tend to be the most focused on or are making the progress? Does like one of them like stand out from the others in some way?
Oh, that's a good question, Russell. Because I don't really have oversight of the of that so many companies and what they specifically are working on. It's a little bit difficult for me to answer. But for our updated standards or how the B Corp certification works after it has been updated since April this year, when companies submit on the latest standards, they are required to meet all the sub requirements that apply to their company based on their size and industry. In a previous version of our assessment, companies actually had a score, or they worked through the questions and sort of get points for practices that they have already in place, and certain practices that they did not have in place, they didn't score, but they just got no points there, but they could then make up points through good practices that they have in place. For the new standards or the updated certification requirements, companies would have to comply with all the sub-requirements assigned to them. So if they are required to monitor waste, they would have to monitor waste. So they wouldn't be able to get out of that.
Okay, thank you very much. And then I'm going to go ahead and pose one to Athalie as well. On the first slide that you had showed, you talked a little bit about what is a plastic footprint, and we also use the term plastic inventory. Where would a company think about measuring and acting on their plastic footprint versus their plastic inventory, whether that might be for, internal goals or maybe EPR reporting or something like that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Russell. Mostly for EPR schemes around the world, those who already have the laws in place. What's really being asked for, if we use the definition of footprint versus inventory, what's really required is the plastic inventory. So this is commonly referred to as footprint. So, for example, in the Philippines, in the law states itself that this is actually footprint, but In reality, this is an inventory of your plastic consumption, both during your operations and post-consumer stage, depending on how the law defines it. So I think the train of thought for plastic footprint, the definition that involves the environmental impact of it, aside from just the inventory. So multiplying this by the leakage potential, the amount of damage that it will do to the environment once it's there. This is already going towards harmonizing with the definitions of carbon footprint, of water footprint. So depending on what your reporting mandates are, and who you're reporting to, I think this should be the definition that really applies. But if you're doing this on a voluntary basis, again, that's the reason that we always try to define our objectives first, just to make sure that we're using the right scope, we're using the right definitions, and we're using the right references.
Awesome. Thank you, Athlete. And then we'll take one more question here before we move on to the next section. And this one's for you, Athlete. I'll just read out the question to you. Hi, I am from Quezon City in the Philippines. This question is for Athlete. I'm currently conducting academic research on EPR and circularity. May I ask if PCX Solutions has mechanisms or openness to collaborate with or accommodate researchers? And what would be the best way to send such requests? Thank you.
Yeah, I think, well, you can send them to info@pcxsolutions.org. Depending on the request, we would also know which person we can assign it to, if it's relevant. But yeah, just give us a message there.
Yeah.
I'll type it
Yeah.
on the chat box as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Athlete. So yeah, I think the answer is yes, reach out to Solutions and we'll see what makes sense. Okay, so let's keep going. The next place we're gonna go is voluntary and EPR-based plastic action. So we heard from Cecilia earlier about the B Corp standards. It's a really great framework to think about your environmental footprint. And then we heard from Athlete on, how do you measure that footprint and what might you do with it? And in this section, we're going to talk about voluntary action you might take in EPR schemes. So like how might you be forced to track your packaging footprint and report on it? So that's what we'll be covering in this next section. And so I'm going to start off with an overview of voluntary plastic credits or voluntary plastic action or environmental impact on your overall packaging portfolio. Voluntary action with plastic credits is something that PCX has been doing a long time. We're the global leader in verified plastic recovery. And the way a plastic credit works, it's a financing mechanism to enable the recovery of plastic in other situations where it might not otherwise happen. So it tends to be incremental, or there's a term called additionality. So let's go through this chart. Every ton of waste diverted gets collected, transported, recycled, upcycled, co-processed, and that turns into one credit. So every plastic credit that someone purchases diverts a ton of waste from ending up in nature to a responsible pathway. And there's benefits on both sides here. There's benefits for the businesses because it's a market efficient and scalable use of capital OpEx. There's multiple examples out there of large corporations making specific investments in a very targeted market, and then maybe they pull out and it doesn't work, or it's just not the best way for that company to be using their capital. It's much more efficient to do your waste diversion this way. It's turnkey, so it's faster and easier for people who want to be driving environmental impact. Tailored to your dynamic needs. If you're using flexible plastic, you can go find recovery that's focused on flexible plastics. And then this third-party verification, which is, everybody needs that. It lowers risk across the board. There's also benefits for projects. These are the people out there actually doing up the cleanup that are getting funded through the mechanism. It distributes operating funding. It just helps them do more positive work in the world. It helps get them on third-party verification standards to ensure that their things are being done the right way. Market-based model lowers volatile pricing by expanding the number of buyers that are out there. And then it's easier to get paid as well going through one of these. So think of credits as a financing mechanism to drive the impact that you want to have in the world, especially when it comes to your plastic footprint. So one way to drive action. Another one, this is a little bit more consumer and branding focused. This is a badging program that PCX has called Plastic Cleanup Partner, and it's a way to convey your commitment to plastic responsibility. You state your verified impact, you can tie it to purchases, and it's a way to opportunity responsibility communicate your actions. So this is a badge, you can put it on pack, you can put it online, and you pair it with the storytelling. If you have committed to clean up your plastic footprint for X number of years, you've cleaned up 10,000 kilograms, 100,000 kilograms, what scale makes sense for your business. There's many other programs like this in carbon and plastic, but this is one example. If your company is thinking about trying to be more responsible with plastic, this is a very straightforward way to start to communicate that to your customers. And these are some examples of project work PCX has been doing in this space. 3 large corporates that we've done some work with. Mondelez International, like in the Philippines, they are a plastic cleanup partner. An example from that previous page, they've made a commitment to cleaning up their full plastic footprint. PepsiCo has sponsored an Allington-Dara Waste to Cash program in the Philippines. The program sponsors a series of women-owned and operated bodegas in some of the lowest income areas of Manila, where it's a waste for cash program. Folks will bring in plastic waste. They get paid a small amount for that, but it is enough to, buy the next meal, buy some household goods that you might need. And it's quite successful. It's had a lot of impact. And this is an example of a corporate taking action. And they even made a video about it that's public. So another example. And then L'Oreal, they've committed in the Philippines to recover 100% of their plastic on an annual basis. To date, 400,000 kilograms. This has been public. This screenshot here is from the news. These are some examples if you're trying to think about what it could look like for your company once you've made these commitments and taken action. These are some of the outcomes that you can start thinking about seeing from that. So now we're going to transition to EPR. So we were talking about voluntary, what you want to do to meet your goals. Sometimes the regulators speak first. And one thing about EPR is localized EPR is becoming complex and fragmented. There's varying goals across countries and states. Athalie mentioned earlier that Solutions has been involved in the Plastic Global Treaty. Markets has been there, PCX Markets, me, where I work. We've been involved in that as well. And there's not a global treaty harmonization. If folks aren't super familiar with the Global Plastic Treaty, perhaps you've heard of the Kyoto Protocol or the Paris Accord, the Paris Climate Agreement, and that's for carbon, where all the countries got together under the United Nations and made an agreement on how you want to treat this. What's the framework for this to do it in the world? The Plastics Treaty was a parallel effort for plastic, and it hasn't passed yet. So we're hopeful that it will restart and we'll get to some agreement, but it hasn't happened yet. And the result of this is countries and states are still pushing localized regulation. And without this agreement, what we've seen in the various countries are ranging objectives. Some jurisdictions are looking to reduce the amount of plastic. Some are looking to fund the recycling system. Some are looking at bans. There's a bunch of different things that are happening in different jurisdictions. The mechanisms are typically fee-based. So the plastic inventory, the packaging inventory, you would report that and pay fees. But there are many exceptions to this in various jurisdictions. And when I say jurisdictions, I'm talking about countries or states or provinces within countries that's happening as well. The reporting requirements vary and the materials and scope vary. We're really hoping we can get a global plastic treaty so we can see more harmonization So companies, especially those that are larger and have multi-jurisdictional footprints to their operations and sales, they can have a more consistent global approach in how they tackle this issue. This is a look at EPR globally. About 70 countries have EPR, and there's more in the pipeline. So everything in green has some type of EPR. To the point of the previous slide, it varies, what exactly that EPR looks like, and places where there's ongoing discussion. One place we'll look a little bit more later is the United States, where a subset of states, just a few of them, have laws already, but it's fragmented in state basis, not at the national level. And so, lots of complexity globally, and it is growing. More and more countries are thinking about this. So quick status check. We haven't had a poll in a little bit. Are you an obligated producer under an active EPR law in your local market? So where you are today, where you're doing business, are you a producer? Some places call them obliged enterprises, but do you have to comply under these laws? The responses are coming quick on this one. I must have made this one pretty straightforward. Give everybody about 10 more seconds to answer, and then we're going to close it. All right. All right. So, are you a producer? About half of people are, and a couple of people aren't sure. Interesting how this contrasts with the question earlier about how in control are you of your packaging footprint data. There are a lot of people who haven't started tracking it, or they're having trouble with it. Yet half of people here are in fact producers. So it looks like a few folks have some work to do to get on top of how you're managing this. All right, let's keep going. Athlete, would you like to come back on screen for a little bit and talk a little bit about an example from Asia? We wanted to do a couple of deep dives on EPR, and so this first one we're going to do is talking about the new-ish law that is active in the Philippines.
Yeah, I see a lot of Filipinos already as participants here, so they might be quite familiar. But I'm also seeing some that are not from the Philippines. So I just wanted to share an example, as Russell mentioned, of EPR in Asia that's also a bit different from the classical European EPR that I think we're used to and have been there for a long time. But basically, this EPR has been set according to the needs of the country. So basically, the global south with different geopolitical situations than most countries in Europe. So not really the same kind of EPR would apply. So this is a bit different. And so some quick facts about the Philippine EPR, who is obliged. So currently it's limited to large enterprises and also micro, small, and medium enterprises with a combined asset value of 100 million pesos, or roughly around 1.7 to 1.8 million US dollars, who generate post-consumer plastic packaging. So right now, it's really limited to plastic packaging, although there are plans to really expand EPR to other materials as well. And this would all be part of our national framework for EPR. Currently, the following materials are covered. So flexible plastic packaging, rigids, plastic bags, and polystyrene. So unlike other EPRs, we don't necessarily have EPR fees. What we have are really what are the strategies that you can employ to either reduce your footprint. So these are the upstream strategies like adoption of reusable packaging, inclusion of recycled content to decrease your consumption, virgin resin consumption, some refilling systems, redesign, other reduction models, basically that Russell will also give a preview of later. Then we also have downstream strategies to basically recover and divert a percentage of your footprint, which I'll get to the next slide. But this covers the recovery of wastes from the environment, and this can be done through buyback programs, offsetting, and this can also be done through funding of waste collectors, waste aggregators, and waste processors. And you can also do some cleanup as long as there's clear chain of custody. And then you can also establish some infrastructure for increased recycling or diversion of recovered waste. And you can go to the next slide. So each obliged enterprise, as we call it, they have three main obligations under the law. So they need to register and phase in an EPR program. So this states like how they will comply to their targets, and the targets are seen in this chart below. So we started in 2023 at 20% recovery and diversion of your plastic footprint, packaging footprint, and then it increases every year until we reach 80% in 2028. And then the third requirement is for you to submit an EPR compliance audit report, so reporting all your accomplishments for the year. And you can do that either as an individual enterprise or you can join a producer responsibility organization. So we're a multi-PRO system, and it's not really mandatory to join a PRO, but of course, usually it is easier because we get the economies of scale for PROs. Yeah. So I think that's the summary that I can provide now. And I think Russell will also discuss some models in some of the states for US EPR. Russell.
Yep, I will. Thank you. All right. So we're going to transition to a different deep dive. We've been looking at the Philippines, and this is another more international one. The US one is brand new. And so we talked about a fragmented market previously. In the US, there's 7 states with EPR laws and a robust pipeline in the future. So while there's no national framework, and we don't expect a national framework anytime soon, got 7 states that have passed laws. California, Oregon, and Colorado already have active reporting across all the categories. There's early reporting in Washington, Minnesota, Maryland, and Maine. And all of these yellow question marks are states where they're developing legislation, but we're not quite sure exactly how it's going to land when it's passed. But I would expect by 2030, we'll probably have 15, at least 10, maybe 15, maybe even 20 states that have active EPR laws. And I expect all of these will have a little bit of nuance between them, so they'll be a bit fragmented in how you report and what they're covering. Typically in the US, the producer is defined as the brand owner, the person who is creating the product, making the decisions about its packaging and putting it into market. This is most situations. There's a few situations where a brand licensee might be the producer instead. Maybe this would be an international company. Someone has the exclusive right to sell and distribute the product in the United States. They would fall in this category. And then finally, if neither of those are straightforward, it's the first seller distributor of the product. And so if it's like an unbranded, like generic packaging type thing, that would be the first seller distributor. So there is a hierarchy, but in most cases, the brand owner is the person who's going to be responsible for reporting the tonnage and paying the fees. So a quick status check here. We talked about your local market, but are you a producer in your local market? So I'm going to launch, are you a producer in the United States? Let's see how international this group is. All right, give people a couple more seconds. All right, I'm going to end this poll. And we have a resounding 0 producers signing up who are producers in the United States. So still a lot to learn from this, and a good insight for how we cover the rest of this webinar. So we'll keep going. What's covered in the U.S. packaging EPR programs? Similar to Europe in many ways, all your single-use packaging is covered in every situation. Food serviceware is usually covered, and then paper products like books and magazines, things like that, are sometimes covered. Again, the fragmented landscape, it's a little bit different in every jurisdiction. So this is not US specific. If you are building a packaging EPR strategy, you need to be managing complexity and making progress, both on improving your plastic portfolio and on timely reporting and making sure your business is operating successfully to meet the objectives. So there's 4 main areas you need to be thinking about. You need to have your data systems set. Because there is annual data reporting, it is just a binary yes or no. Can you manage this data? You need to have your systems, your stakeholder data access, and sometimes EPR specific external tools can help a lot, because haven't seen many companies that have like an ERP system where it spits out the report that you have your packaging weights and your sales unified in one place. It's very unusual. We haven't actually seen anyone with a good version of that. The second area is teaming. You need to figure out which parts of your organization need to be involved. A lot of times, if you're getting started, a smaller team with clear roles is a good way to be agile. But then you're eventually going to have IT, compliance, finance, supply chain. If there's productions or changes involved, you're going to need marketing in there as well. You need to work out your processes and procedures too. So who's in charge of this and who makes decisions? It can be a little boring, a little old-fashioned, but a RACI model, responsible, accountable, informed, consulted, is a really great way to map out, how your company is going to manage this and what role is responsible for what. And then finally, you need to work out your packaging strategy. Previously, maybe product strategy or something like that is something you've been thinking about. But packaging, because of these EPR laws and sustainability focuses, it's more and more important to have your packaging strategy figured out. And so you want to decide where and how to optimize your packaging for source reduction, which is lowering your amount of packaging in certain categories, or simply just improving it. So you'll need a business case for that, and a program plan to be managed on a year-over-year basis so it doesn't fall to the wayside. Putting all 4 of these things together are what we see as the key components to companies that are actually making really good progress on this. So definitely something to consider and think about as you set up the program at your company or improve it. The next one, this is an example of the EPR challenge that we see. At PCX Markets, we work with a lot of companies on EPR compliance, managing the system, tracking the data, reporting the data, making improvements. This diagram here is an example of how we see many companies tackling this problem. So usually there's someone who's learning about EPR. Maybe they're a packaging engineer, maybe they're a attorney that works in compliance, maybe it's a dedicated sustainability role. There's somebody that's learning about what the obligations are. Then you go to collect the data. So you might have an ERP system, you might have a sales system, you might have bills of materials that are sitting on somebody's like share drive in operations, and you've got to consolidate all of that together, and then you have to submit it. Sometimes you have the same packaging, different reporting, so it's another layer of nuance. And then it's a program that needs to be maintained year over year. For most EPRs, it's something that you're going to repeat annually in every jurisdiction forever. And this is a real challenge where many companies, we've seen this treating this as one-off projects when it's really a program that needs to be managed. Think about it like your annual tax compliance, There's established processes and procedures to do that. You need to start thinking about packaging EPR in that lens as well. And the takeaway is it turns into compounding risk, cost, and complexity for companies that are just getting started. There's tools you can use to work on this. This is the example of our offering from PCX Markets. We call it the Responsibility Intelligence Platform, and it helps become your single source of truth for all your packaging and reporting data. It's always available. You can see financial allocations in here, multiple users. It's not hidden away on somebody's drive on a spreadsheet that needs to be updated, for example. And it's an integrated service offering. It combines policy intelligence. So what's developing in the law? What about this adjacent country? What about the other state that is working on a new law that isn't in place yet? How's that going to affect your company and your situation? It combines experienced global EPR analyst. So nobody's data is perfect. Almost all of it is going to take some level of transformation, interpretation, filling the gaps and understanding where you might be missing something or you haven't found an exemption, for example. There's a team of experts that help you with this. And then the scalable platform that pulls it all together in one place where you can start to see your footprint, your financial allocation, and help you understand your reporting. Oh, and reporting comes out of this as well. So some examples of this is our tool, of course, but I think there's others out there. But it brings visibility to your packaging data. You want to be able to see for your portfolio things like this. How much tonnage do you have? How many components are part of that? If you have multiple divisions in your company, this example is beverage and snacks, but maybe your home care and personal care if you're a different type of company. You want to be able to see that on those types of divisions and breaking down your packaging portfolio by weight, what's recyclable, your top SKUs, be able to see all of that. You want to be able to report for compliance. Ours has you push a button and the report comes out at the end. It's ready for submission. And then finally, you want to be able to make financially informed managerial decisions. So being able to see where your fees come out, what's your total financial obligation? How does that map between business units? How does that map between material types? Oftentimes, recyclable materials like papers or metals tend to have lower fees than non-recyclable materials like flexible films. If you're interested in learning more about our tool or just how to think about this in general, contact us. We can give you a demonstration. So for the final section of this webinar, we're going to talk about your plastic source reduction playbook. So your plastic part of your environmental footprint, how do you do less of it? To Cecilia's point in the beginning, that pyramid, the number one thing is avoidance. And so how do you reduce the amount of plastic that you're putting into the market to begin with? This is one example. California has a new law. It's super progressive, and we think we'll start to see more of this globally. And it's requiring a 25% plastic source reduction by 2032. And that means from companies' 2023 baseline, by 2032, they have to produce 25% less plastic by weight, 25% less plastic by the count of components, and the plastic has to be 100% recyclable. While source reduction is something you should be thinking about for your own environmental goals, this is one example where a policy is forcing the hand of producers. The way this works in California is you have a baseline and it's constant, doesn't change. And producers have to reduce 25% from that baseline. But over this course of 10 years between 23 and 32, you might be growing. Your business is probably growing year over year. And if you're growing at a 3-4 annual compounded rate, that's going to turn your actual reduction target into 40 or 50%. Very challenging for some companies in California, but it's a way to think about your reductions in for your organization. Like pick a point in time. How can we get less over time? Even if we're growing, maybe we want to grow out of plastic, Maybe it's lightweighting, maybe it's elimination. There's many pathways you can do to start to achieve these targets. And with that, this is a overall framework that works for everybody to think about source reduction. What pathway are you going to choose? One option is elimination, so removing unnecessary plastic components. The next one is lightweighting. You have a bottle, you make it thinner, less tonnage, less strain on the system. The next one is increasing PCR. While it might not necessarily reduce the amount of plastic, it starts to pull in PCR that is post-consumer from the marketplace, which will drive recycling rates and help the overall system as well. It's an admirable goal. Shifting to non-plastic packaging, this is a good option as well. So maybe you have a bag of chips and it's in a multi-layer non-recyclable plastic bag. There's options out there. You could switch to paper. There's paper with thin film. There's paper with metallicized. There's many different options to get out of that plastic and into a more environmentally friendly, more recyclable, more compostable version of packaging that suits your needs. And the final one is reduce, reuse, and refill. Maybe you keep that packaging, but you're designing it to be used over and over again. And that can become an interesting relationship model with the customer as well. As we think about these in terms of timeline, the quick wins tend to be on the left. If you can find something to eliminate that's unnecessary, quick win, get rid of it. But shifting to non-plastic and reuse and refill models tend to take a little bit longer than some, quick wins. Very interesting framework to think about. If you're looking to expand or map out the universe of what's possible for your organization, this is a great place to start.
Russell, if I can just come in on that,
go for it.
If you go back to the previous one. So yeah, this is very interesting. And I'm looking specifically at a shift to non-plastic packaging, where we are in Singapore. There's quite often a debate here, which is whether switching to glass, switching to metal, or alternatives is any better in a country like Singapore. Most of the waste in Singapore gets incinerated for waste to energy, and we know domestic recycling rates is very low in Singapore. So again, I want to tie this back to our standards where we talk about companies monitoring where waste ends up, which I think can be quite a challenge. And would you be able to comment on or give any tips to companies when they want to shift to non-plastic packaging? What is some of the considerations they have to make for choosing an alternative?
Yeah, there are a lot of considerations, to be honest, and it's going to depend on each company's specific situation, the type of product they make, are there food requirements, and what's the level of branding that's associated with it. So things that tend to be secondary and tertiary packaging in nature. So secondary packaging would be you have a bunch of units, they go in a box that's secondary. And that box gets shipped somewhere, and there's packaging materials that help that go in transit. That's tertiary. Shifting to non-plastic where it doesn't touch the consumer can be easier in many situations because it doesn't affect the product quite as much. Sometimes it's less impactful in total weight, but that can be easier. Another consideration is cost. Just to be honest, a lot of companies are using plastic because it's cheaper and it's high performance at the same time. Cost is certainly an answer, or not an answer, a consideration that the companies that we work with are thinking about when they go to make changes there. And then the last one is, of course, performance and how it performs for your customer. There's a lot of really great new options that are non-plastic out there that look good, they feel good. There's a great story that you can tell about it, create a more positive brand sustainability halo and look and feel. But if you have a food product with a long shelf life, like you got to make sure that those barrier properties are still maintained. So really different for companies in different sectors, but those are some of the main ones that come up a lot for us.
Thank you.
All right. Let's keep going. Gonna skip over this one, and then we're gonna go to a case study. We were talking just now about source reduction pathways, how to lower the amount of plastic that's in your portfolio. And there are many, many options that are off the shelf, whether it's something you want to do straight away to, just make a swap, or it might be inspiration for how to think about it with your company. And so I was talking a minute ago about the primary, secondary, tertiary packaging. I'm glad you asked that question, Cecilia. Primary, it is the product. It is the thing that is containing the product that the customer sees. These are some examples where, a blister pack, which tends to be like PVC material, which is pretty much not recyclable anywhere. There's paper-based options depending on the format and the needs of the product. Removing non-functional plastic components. This is an example of a bakery box that's got a plastic window in it. There's a lot of options that don't have the plastic window because the plastic window makes it hard or impossible to recycle. Even a paper recycler who gets that, they don't want to see all the plastic components in there. It makes that paper less recyclable when it's in this kind of format. And then finally, off-the-shelf swaps for lighter weight things that take up less space that kind of help with the cubing of the shipping to lower the carbon footprint as well. And then secondary, a lot of products come in plastic overwraps. This is a quick elimination opportunity. There's different types of boxing and packaging that can replace that. And then in consumer settings, like in store, if you think about it, like an end cap, that might be end cap being the display that's on the end of an aisle in a retail setting. You can eliminate or lessen the plastic that's in those display trays. And that one can be a quick win. There's a lot of examples out there of doing things like that. And then in tertiary packaging, these are things the customer doesn't typically see as much unless it's e-commerce setting. Sometimes people see this a little bit. But switching to paper packing and void fill. Plastic pillows are a very common, e-commerce thing. You've got something that's a little bit fragile. You want to keep it from rattling around in the box too much. There's a lot of paper options out there. Gets rid of the plastic, makes it more recyclable. If it's in a box, you recycle it with the box. It makes a lot of sense. The second one is water activated tape. This one's really interesting, especially for an e-commerce setting, because if packages are being shipped in a cardboard box and they're being taped with a plastic, that plastic is a contaminant in the paper stream. Water activated tape is an example where it's a paper tape with some fiberglass reinforcement and a starch-based adhesive that actually glues really well to the cardboard. It becomes like a piece of the packaging. Makes that package much more recyclable, eliminates the plastic. And there's a bunch of machines out there today that actually make this a productivity play, like you're saving money with less time and less waste inside of the facility. And then there's lightweighting opportunities here as well. Thinner gauge, wrap on pallets, reusable pallets, like things like that. If you think about your packaging portfolio, you probably can't change all of it at once, but there are multiple quick wins in each of these categories where you can start thinking about ways to start making reductions so that you can have the bigger reductions coming in wave two. And with that, we're going to go to Q&A. I saw there were some comments and questions that came in, and we will start to take some of those now. So I'm trying to do both here at once here, both things at once. But first question I see that's open. Does PCX partner with local upcyclers after the collection of plastics, or does PCX process the plastic themselves? Good question. PCX partners. Through our plastic credit offering, we operate a marketplace where a buyer of the plastic credit may be looking for an upcycling opportunity has an opportunity to see multiple projects that are doing this work and choose the one that's the right fit for them. And we facilitate that process through the plastic credit. We don't own or operate on the ground recycling facilities ourselves. I think that's the answer to that one.
Russell, there's a question in the chat. If you can look at Jack Swan's question, he's asking about fragmented EPR systems and how if that would inhibit change.
Yes. So how does a fragmented EPR system drive change? Won't less committed businesses try to relocate to other states? It's a good question. While a fragmented EPR landscape is harder for companies to comply with, I think it can still drive change. Generally, these programs are still having producers figure out how much weight or components they have and then pay fees in some way or another, or in the example Athalie gave, taking direct responsibility to either reduce or recover that plastic. That will drive change over time. It will certainly be stronger if and when we get a global plastic treaty. So I think everybody's looking forward to that when it happens. And then won't less committed businesses try to relocate to other states? I mean, I think that's a real question. If the legislative EPR and cost burden becomes too high, it is possible that companies that, sell in multiple states might say, we're done with California because California is too complicated for us. But California, just in this hypothetical example, California has a huge GDP and a lot of people buying a lot of product. It's really hard for a company to make a decision to move out of a state just because they have to deal with a complicated EPR program. So we haven't seen much of that yet, but we'll see how that develops over time. Great question.
Now, I had a question in the Q&A that maybe I can just talk over. So there was a question on recertification for companies. So I'll drop in the chat actually a link to the B Impact. So for companies who's interested in certifying or those who's working on recertification, the start would be to open an account in our B Impact platform. It is free for any company to assess and open an account, complete the setup to see in which size and sector category your company will land, and then you will see a customized assessment and which specific requirements will apply to your company. So I dropped the link to the B Impact in the chat. And then another tip would be to get in touch with your local B Lab partner. So you are all global in the call today. So we have partners in US and Canada, of course in Singapore, in Southeast Asia, B Market Builder Southeast Asia, B Lab AANZ, and so forth. Would be there to support you.
Excellent. Thanks, Cecilia. I just realized because Jack had added some to his question that I hadn't fully answered yet. There's a question about would more state incentives need to be dished out to get businesses on board? And with EPR programs, at least how we're seeing them in the US, there are both carrots and sticks. Carrots meaning bonuses and things to like make you want to do it, and then sticks being fines and punishments for not doing it. And the sticks sometimes speak louder to the companies. In all states that have passed EPR laws so far, there are fines laid out by the regulators, and they can be pretty steep. For example, California's is $50,000 US dollars per day that a company is out of compliance. The law is new, so we've yet to see how that's going to be enforced, but I would expect it would be enforced. And to your final question about that you would either comply or not get to sell in the California market, that is an end case. If there's a large producer, if they're just not complying over time, that is a risk that company would have to think about.
Russell, there's another question in the Q&A that's asking about how can you qualify as a PCX partner as a waste diverter in the Philippines?
I can take this, Russell, if you
Yeah.
allow.
Yeah, no, you got
Yeah.
it. You got it, Athlete.
Yeah, because as mentioned in my introduction of PCX solutions earlier, we maintain a standard. It's called the Plastic Pollution Reduction Standard. So this standard is basically a framework for waste diverters, collectors, aggregators, and basically how to qualify and later on issue plastic credits. So this also serves as a framework for plastic credits. So if you do want to become a PCX partner in the Philippines for EPR compliance or voluntary EPR basically, feel free to check out that standard. It's called the Plastic Pollution Reduction Standard, PPRS. And also, please feel free to reach out to us through the same email address I gave before, which is info@pcxsolutions.org, and we can assist you through the process of how to do that.
All right. And then I think we have time for maybe one last question. And this one is from Romaldo. And I need to interpret this a little bit. Is PCX Philippines have sources or suppliers of plastic twice that is recyclable or biodegradable? I think this question is about, are there sources of plastic feedstock that is both recyclable or biodegradable? And the answer is yes for recyclable. If you're interested in procuring plastic feedstock for your supply chain, if you want to work with one of these projects that is, cleaning plastic, preventing it from entering nature, reach out to us and we can help you with that. And I think that's it, unless Cecilia, Athley, you're seeing anything else, or actually, through another minute, there is one more thing. Contact us. If you have questions from this webinar, you can contact Cecilia to learn more about B Lab here on the left. You can contact me from the PCX side, and you can also contact Athlete from the email address she's dropped into the chat previously. And I have one last poll that I'm going to launch here. If you have a minute before you go, we would love to know your feedback on this webinar. Was it valuable to you? Did it increase your understanding of plastic responsibility? Would you like more content like this? This is the first one we've done with B Lab in this way, and we could be doing more for this audience. And then finally, what's the most useful part of this webinar? Free form, what did you like? What would you like to see more of?
Yes, I want to say before we close the call, just thank you to everyone who joined the call today. Yes, I hope to see more companies engage with the B Corp standards. And those of you who are recertifying, reach out. We are there to support you through the recertification process as well.
Excellent. And with that, we will end. Thank you for those who have responded to this poll. We'll take your feedback and keep delivering content like this. We want to make sure it's valuable for everybody here, both learning about what's happening with B Lab and what's happening generally with plastic responsibility. Thank you so much.